This is the Female Founder Show with host and entrepreneur Bridget Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.
Hello everyone, today I'm thrilled to welcome Julia Stewart to the Female Founder Show. Julia is the founder and CEO of Alurx, a wellness coaching app designed to make preventative healthcare accessible to everyone and soon to be powered by AI. Before launching Alurx, Julie served as chair and CEO of Dine Brands Global, where she brought together two iconic names, IHOP and Applebee's, creating the world's largest sit-down restaurant company. She's been recognized by Forbes as one of the most powerful women in the U.S., and for good reason. You may have seen Julia's incredible story circulating on social media. After being passed over for the CEO role of Applebee's, despite doubling the company's stock and growing the brand, she resigned, joined IHOP, and later led IHOP's $2.1 billion acquisition of Applebee's. In a full circle moment, she became CEO of both companies, now known as Dine Brands Global. But that's not her full story. Today, we'll hear more about the company she founded, Alurx, which focuses on helping people live healthier, more balanced lives, and how she's redefining what leadership and purpose look like in the next chapter. Julia has had a very impressive career, breaking glass ceilings, building incredible teams, mentoring others, and now leading a company that's transforming preventative healthcare. I know you'll be inspired by Julia's story, so with that, Julia, welcome to the show.
This is wonderful.
Yes, I'm excited to talk to you about your journey as well as Alurx. So now you've had such an amazing career from starting out in restaurants to leading some of the biggest brands in the country. Can you talk to us a little bit about the early days in your career?
The early days. So it really did start with my first job was as a food server at an IHOP. So I was young in high school, needed a car, so I needed to raise money to get a car. And so I went to work for a local IHOP restaurant in San Diego. It was owned by a franchisee, and I loved it. I fell, I fell in love instantly with the family atmosphere in the restaurant, the family team environment, the people who came into the restaurant. And I think I loved the fact that I would get feedback every day. So at the end of every shift, I would have a sense of how did I do? What did people like? What did people dislike? You know, I loved the whole environment. And fortunately, I think for me, I went off to college, and while in college, worked in a restaurant, a high-end steakhouse. And then when I graduated, I immediately went into the restaurant business. So I spent, because my degree was in marketing and business, I spent the first 14 years in marketing, all for restaurants, and was learning the business and getting more and more responsibility and accountability. And then after 14 years, made the decision. I didn't think anybody, and by then I knew I wanted to be CEO of a restaurant chain or at least a company. And by then I knew that I didn't think anybody would hire somebody from marketing into a CEO job. So I went into operations, which was easier said than done. But finally got a job in operations, spent 10 years in operations for Taco Bell, and then 20 as CEO. So when you add all that up, it's a long time in the restaurant business. But it all started from being a food server at IHOP.
Which is great, such a great foundation for anyone building their career to start in that customer-facing role as servers do. So I'm sure that you learned a lot in those years as well.
Absolutely, and I've told everyone and anyone that would ever listen, if you can't gain that sort of empathy early on for the customer or whoever you are whatever business you're in, it's really hard. So I always felt like I had a leg up.
Yeah. So you made the move from marketing to operations. Was that a difficult transaction or a transition for people to when they probably saw you in this one role as marketing and then to move into operations? How did that transition go?
That was not easy. That was very, very difficult. And I think the pigeonholing still goes on today. I'd love to say it's all over and you don't have those issues, but that's part, I think, of corporate America. They still have a tendency to pigeonhole you. So when I went to my own company and said, hey, I'd like to leave marketing and go into operations. And the then CEO said, that's really the most ridiculous thing I ever heard of. So that didn't work so well.
Yeah.
So I went looking, and I had heard at the time that Taco Bell was looking for what they called advanced management recruits, AMRs, that came from different businesses. They could teach them operations, and they could bring a whole another level of expertise to the business. And so I called the executive recruiter, and the executive recruiter said, absolutely not. You don't meet the profile, which I never understood. Isn't that the profile? Is anyway. Long story short, I was getting the company that I work for was getting an award, as was Taco Bell. So I was at the same conference in Chicago for the National Restaurant Association. And I had heard through the rumor mill that the CEO of Taco Bell was going to be there. This is a true story. And so when no one was looking, I asked the woman who was coordinating the meeting, there was like a cocktail hour and then there was going to be dinner. And I said, do you mind showing me where my seat is at the dinner? It was assigned seating. And she took me to my seat, and I said, would you mind showing me where John Martin, who the then CEO was? And she said, well, it's way over here. And I switched seats with someone so that I could sit next to him. He never knew until much later. And the rest, as they say, is history. I convinced him that I would be right for the job. And the next week, the executive recruiter called and said, I don't know what happened, but you're going on an interview. I mean, obviously, there was a lot there.
Sure.
And I convinced the people that I was interviewing with, and I got the job. But I often wonder what woulda, coulda, shoulda had I not done that switching of the dinner cards. I mean, who will ever know? But
Right.
It just goes to show you I created a little bit of my own fate.
Yes, and two big lessons there. You do not take no for an answer, starting with the previous company. And
No.
then also taking advantage of an opportunity. You looked for it, you found
Right.
it, and you went for it. So two big lessons there for
Exactly
sure.
right. Yeah.
Now, let's
Exactly.
talk about, now you've made the move from your massive success in the restaurant world to launching a wellness company, and that's such a big shift. What were some of the challenges that you faced taking this leap?
So let me rewind the tape a little bit. So in between taking that job at Taco Bell, I had then become CEO of a much larger entity, and I did that for 20 years. And during that whole time that I was running this public company, 250,000 employees, 2.5 million customers serving a day, I witnessed and saw every day many people not taking good care of themselves, not learning healthy habits. And I had been raised by two teachers that it was always about take care of yourself first and foremost before you do anything else. And that really was, three basic components: sleep well, eat well, and exercise. So that is the way I was raised. And it became, I think, because I grew up with teachers who didn't have a lot, but they certainly had this basic fundamental belief in taking care of one another and each other and themselves. I saw day to day, both running the company, looking at the insurance, and then obviously watching consumers every day, that healthy habits was harder than you may think. And for many people. And I remember thinking, someday I'll be able to be in a position where I might be able to really impact and influence. And during all of that time in the restaurant space, by the time I got to the brand, it was what we call everyday indulgence. So kind of hard to teach somebody, although I can still teach you how to eat for less than 500 calories at an IHOP. I can teach you how to use Weight Watchers at Applebee's. I can still teach you how to eat differently at Taco Bell. It's all doable, but most people prefer the everyday indulgence. And when you do that frequently, in addition to everything else you're doing in your personal life, there's nothing wrong with an occasional indulgence, and we all do it, including myself. But the day-to-day, you have to take care of yourself. Yeah. And frankly, that was sort of the epiphany I had in those 20 years as CEO. And when I left, I decided I would begin looking, researching, and better understanding how I could make a difference. So I always tell people, I've never had anybody say to me, no, I don't want to help you. No, I don't want to give you advice. No, I don't want to tell you about my world. So as soon as I left and had taken a breather, I did I don't know, had to be 50 informational interviews with people in the healthcare industry, both physicians, both advisors, clinical psychologists, behavioral psychologists. I mean, I started talking to anybody and everyone who would listen to me and began to formulate an idea, did some consumer research, both qualitative and quantitative, and then began to write a business plan, which literally was on all these walls in my office about what it would look like. And that was the start of Alurx.
Okay, so let's talk about Alurx for a little bit. Tell us what Alurx does for people.
So when I started it, it was all about how I could take just a simple app and find out about your needs, initially just in sleep, nutrition, and stress management, because at the time, those were the things that people wanted and needed most. And it was smack dab in the middle of COVID. And so Google would tell you those were the three things people were researching. So it made sense that I would pivot to the three things that people wanted the most. And so created this app on the Apple Store that people could sign up for, and you could only sign up for one thing at a time, and it would give you daily, it would prompt, and it would talk to you daily in an app, and it would tell you the kinds of things you needed to do. So for example, you went on it and you talked about yourself and you answered several questions and you said, I'm just not sleeping. Then we had physicians who were writing programs depending on where you occasionally had difficulty, you had moderate issues, or you had major issues. And we had sleep experts who were writing programs for you, and we were putting that into the database and into the app. And we did that throughout COVID. However, we began to realize that people's lives were far more complicated and they wanted even more personalization than we were giving them. And I was able to find some additional tech help that would get us literally using AI, not the kind of AI you're used, not ChatGPT, but proprietary AI that would enable us to pull specific data-based, science-backed research and guide you through whatever you needed in the way of your health and wellness. And so that is what we are in the midst of building. So the Alurx Wellness app is still available on the Apple Store, but I am in the midst of fundraising so that we can build the next generation, which is both scalable, sustainable, and highly personalized. But I will tell you, even in the Alurx Wellness app, the things I've learned to do that I never knew, box breathing, meditation, things I never knew that have just helped me. And I'm literally proud to tell you, I went to get my physical on a week ago, Friday, and the doctor called yesterday, literally yesterday called to tell me that I have a body of somebody 20 years younger. And I'm convinced it is the daily routines, all that I do to stay healthy. And healthy isn't just physical, it's also mental.
Absolutely.
Which I learned. I probably took on, a certain amount of stress is good for you, but too much stress and the inability to deal with it creates longer term issues. So, but I'm telling you, it's so gratifying, just as the food service business was, when people would say, this particular situation changed my life, or this food server made a difference in my family. For me, people writing me saying, because of you, I've gotten on a routine. I just had a baby. I just did this. I just did that. And all of a sudden making a difference and learning. And at the key is learning. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm educating you, teaching you, and then prompting you. So as my tech guy likes to say, so Julia, I'm going to use this the rest of my life.
Yeah. And for so many people now, especially, they want to know, they don't want someone to just tell them what to do. They want to know why they're doing it. Stress management is a huge part of that. Yes, exactly. And how? Yeah. How do I do this?
And so the doctor, my actual doctor is also helping as well. She really became infatuated with Alurx. And like she said one day, look, Julia, I write doctor's orders all day long. I tell you the what. I don't necessarily tell you the how. And what I love about the app is you're like the how of healthcare. And I was reading an article last week that said by 2040, 65% of all healthcare will be focused on prevention, which is what we're about. We're all about preventing and having you live a longer, healthier life because you're taking care of yourself every day and getting healthy routines and healthy habits. And that was really born out of watching so many people not take care of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's shift gears for a second and talk about what has been the biggest surprise about stepping into the founder role compared to your time in restaurants and hospitality?
So, and I don't know if you would know this, but my entire 40 plus year career in the restaurant space was certainly company operated and owned restaurants, but largely franchisees. Yeah. So I spent my entire career, teaching, impacting, influencing, coaching entrepreneurs, franchisees, how to do a better job in their business. So when you've been doing it for 40 plus years, you feel like you have some capability yourself, right? So part of that, the transition, which I think people don't readily realize, came easy for me because I had spent 40 plus years coaching and educating others. So that part really wasn't difficult. I think, and think about throughout my career, whether it was doing M&A or financial analysis or whatever, dealing with banks and borrowing money or paying down debt or high finance, it all came easy, right? Yeah. But when you're doing it on a small scale and it's you and it's your business, it was much harder. So I would say for me, and attracting and finding a great team wasn't difficult. I mean, I'm very blessed that I have come across some wonderful team members, and that part's easy for me. I think the most difficult part was raising money. And it was probably... It wasn't initially, the friends and family raise was easy, but now raising this next round for significant money, it's been very interesting what I have learned about VC and private equity, which in the United States, not outside the US, but in the US, 98% of all venture capital money goes to men, does not go to women. And so that was sort of like a statistic, like, surely that can't be right. Yeah. I mean, right. I remember the first time somebody told me that fairly early on in doing this. I'm like, no, that can't be a right statistic. I mean, surely there's a problem. And so when I went back and validated it, it's absolutely correct. And I'm not sure I can tell you why, but I can tell you that when I actually get people on the phone and I explain my 42-year career and the last 20 as a public CEO, and, taking businesses from little to big and taking the company I last worked for from 400 million in market cap to 5 billion, people are like, what? And now doing this, there is a bit of a morphing, but I still think it's an interesting dynamic that I think in our lifetime will change, but it's been slow to change. And I also think it is for many women that I speak to weekly and that I still do some coaching and mentoring for, it's a deterrent. People get, it's really a deterrent, and you have to tell them you got to overcome it. And it only takes one good investor and you're fine. So I think, but it's been interesting. That has been surprising. I think the biggest surprise.
Yes, and even with the career that you've had and all of your accolades, you're still having a hard time. Yeah. You would think that people would be in line to help you with your project. So
I think that is the most interesting. Now, having said all that to you, as I find the right places to go, and I'm not being funny about that, find the right people who tell you to go to this person or that person or introduce you. I'm finding more women who are becoming investors and are far more interested in health tech and healthcare and making a difference. But it was trying to find the right people, which sometimes felt like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's finally finding the right people in the industry, both in the private world and the public world, who have realized that healthcare and preventive healthcare is the wave of the future.
Really is.
And so it's getting easier today than maybe a couple of years ago, but yeah, definitely been a surprise.
Yeah. Now, you talked before about learning the importance of empathy. How has empathy played a role in being a founder and leading your business today?
So I really am my father's daughter, who was a teacher as well as my mother. And he always used to say, from when I can first remember, it's a privilege to be able to learn and to lead. And so don't ever forget that, Julia. Always be learning and always put yourself in the shoes of the person that you are impacting. So I guess I just was fortunate enough that I learned it, and it grew into a real asset for me early on to have empathy. And so by the time I went into the work environment, empathy and learning sort of became, cornerstones for the way I operated. And from an early age, I learned to ask people, I don't understand that. Can you help me? And as I said to you earlier, I never had anybody say, nope, not going to teach you, not going to educate you, not going to share. I just never had that problem. So if you ask people, I don't understand that business, or can you help me with, from an early on, that became part of it. And then having a real empathy early on for, customers, or being in that shoe, or being in that role, or understanding it. And then frankly, as I was climbing the ladder, and my ladder sort of looked like this, now I call it, we've learned to call it experience capital. But back then I didn't know what to call it, but that's what it is, right? I remember many a time thinking, with whether it was a supervisor or the CEO of the company, learning very early on, I don't want to be that way. I don't want to do that. I don't want to act that way. And so it was taking all of that in and sort of developing my own management style way before I was managing anyone, was here's what it takes in my mind to be successful. And so out of that, because I've often been asked, how did you get your management style? And it was frankly watching people who were not successful, or who were not particularly, I didn't see as great leaders. And so it was learning and empathizing, I could do this differently and better. And then ultimately, not only does the empathy make you a great leader, a great mom, a great sister, a great friend, a great wife, a great whatever, but it also helps you in being a great producer of a product that consumers love, whether that's in the restaurant business or in health tech. Having that empathy for being on the other side or experiencing it yourself, I don't think there's anything that really takes the place of that. And as I would climb the ladder, I began to realize even more so the importance of empathy and learning, and not having to be the smartest person in the room, not having to have all the answers. It made me a better leader.
Now, it sounds like from a young age, your life has been very serendipitous, but not. It's really, you have paved this way based on your experiences, life, and what you have learned over the years. And every founder that I talk to has these moments of doubt when they maybe think, what am I doing? This is never going to work. I don't feel like you're the type of person that's ever said that. But have you ever had those moments of doubt? And if so,
no, it's interesting. It's a great question, by the way. And I do get asked that, but it's funny. I don't, others do. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about, you asked a question, not today on this, but I think you said something about, hey, Julia, what's the most surprising thing you hear from people? It's that. I will talk to almost always potential investors who will say, so what if this doesn't work? What if you can't raise the money? What if you, and my answer is, that's the least of all my worries. I mean, I would never be doing this unless I didn't have conviction of heart and have done my research, talked to enough people to know this is the future. I mean, I'm very comfortable, and we're probably disrupting healthcare as we know it today. So I'm very comfortable in what we're doing. I think sometimes it's not letting others who, for whatever reason,
Right.
don't go there, but for whatever reason, I don't know, your own personal career, but I certainly had maybe one or two occasions in my career where you worked in a culture where my success meant someone else's failure. And I don't come from that world. So I come from the world of everybody has a chance to win.
Yeah.
And we can all be better for it. So, but I do think I've certainly heard more than one person like, why aren't you just going and sitting on a beach somewhere and relaxing? Because I don't want to.
Right. And sometimes that doubt comes from people very close to you, and that's when it's very hard. I know you talked about the investors doubting, but when you're talking to friends and family about a dream or a vision that you might have, and you're going to do it, whatever, doesn't matter what they say, and when you hear that, it's difficult. But
it's a learning for all of us. When someone comes to you and says, "I have a dream," listen. Because that dream can become a reality. And if you think about most things that you enjoy today, right, in your day-to-day life came from somebody dreaming. I'm a big believer that one must spend time dreaming and having, those just moments of, I just want to dream. And if you're surrounding yourself with people who don't want to let you dream, or who want to quelch that dream, it does give you pause for, why is that? And do I really need to be around that person all the time? And by the way, that's true not just in your corporate life or, you work for somebody. It's also true in your personal life. It's a very fair comment about, I want this and I feel passionate about it. Now, if you have to, if you're financially in a situation where you can't do that, then you do it on the side until it becomes, a possibility, which I still teach all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it's my own children or it's coaching and mentoring others, don't give up your dream. You may have to pause that to do what you need to do to get by, but never give up the dream.
Love that. I saw a podcast that you were on recently, and you mentioned someone when you were very young told you, I think it was a teacher, told you that you can be anything that you want to be. I think that's so important as leaders as we're, building a team and talking to people every day to keep that mindset in front of them. Talk to us about the importance of that, because I didn't have that, and it made things a little bit difficult for me, things I still work on today. Am I enough? And all of the things that so many women and men deal with every day. But talk to us about the importance of when you are mentoring people, how to make them feel like they can do anything.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that question, because I would say sometimes because I do mentor, at any given time, I try to mentor a couple of people, and that's my, how part of what makes you fulfilled in life is giving back, paying it forward. I pay it forward by coaching and mentoring, and it's an interesting question that you asked, because as I reflect on that, sometimes they just need me to give them permission, to tell them it's possible. I often find, and I mentor at all different levels, men and women, right? Starting out, just getting out of college, where I had somebody the other day and they said, I'm pigeonholed. I don't want to do this for a living. I've made my decision. I'm like, okay, well, then you have to decide how you're going to get out from the position that you're in, which is something they didn't want to do, and to get into something they have passion about and care about. And frankly, I kept telling her, the fact that you're 25 years old and you already found that out, you're light years ahead of so many other people. Conversely, I coached somebody the other day who's a senior executive in a major corporation and is very successful and is part of the executive C-suite and isn't happy, not because she doesn't like her job, but because she doesn't like who she works for. And we had a lengthy conversation about how to address that. And again, I said, you know exactly what to do. You are very savvy and very capable, but I think she needed someone to give her permission. So sometimes coaching and mentoring and finding that space is also about just reinforcing. For me, in my own personal life, I've always had a plan. Since I was probably in college, it's literally next to it's right there. I always have my plan. It's my top 10 items in my life that are critical to me. And that plan changes for me. It's usually changed about every 5 to 10 years. But I always keep it beside me, and I always remind myself, this is my vision. This is my focus for me personally and professionally. And it's really guided me about, okay, it's about time to start figuring out how do you get from point A to point B and work the plan. Like I told you early on, my career move wasn't like this. It wasn't a straight ladder. It was sideways. I coach somebody who works in nonprofit. Same basic principle. It doesn't really matter whatever you're doing, whether it's for corporate America or it's on your own or something in between. Working those plans become critically important, and giving yourself clear milestones. That's always been a guiding force for me. And if you ask me where that came from, I can't tell you. I just somehow intuitively knew by the time I got to college, I needed a plan. So I knew, even when I was in high school, I knew my parents couldn't afford college. So if I was going to go to college, the only way I could think to do that was to earn a scholarship. So what was I good at in high school? I was on the speech team. So my whole thing was, okay, if I win, the odds are someone will pick me up. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, the quote goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So,
well,
so
and again, I had a woman who's very successful, entering the second phase of her life and doing something different. And she made a really interesting comment to me. She said, okay, I've done all these plans. I've followed my own, but I got thrown a zinger. And so not at all what I anticipated. And her position was eliminated. Right. And so now she has to start all over. And I'm like, yes, but how wonderful for you that after all these years, now you get to think about what's next, and you get to interview people. And she's like, I've never been on an informational interview. And I'm like, here's how it works. Take some of the people you've worked with or that were your clients in the past and ask them about what they like and what they don't like. She's like, I never thought about it. You know, it's like, here's a whole nother phase for you. So it doesn't have to be failure. It has to be what's next and how to think about it. And I do think it's about the glass being half full, not half empty.
And I hear that in everything that you've said today. So
Yeah.
I love your positive mindset is,
Yeah.
I think you can move mountains with that kind of attitude. So that's
Absolutely. And there will be setbacks. I've never met anybody who didn't have a setback, including my own and several of them. But it's what you do with that and how that doesn't have to define you. That what defines you is what you want and how you want to get there and who you want to be. The definition is all about you. And I know we know that, and I think intuitively we know that. It's the practicality of it that sometimes needs a refresher or a reminder, or to your point, someone in your sphere of influence who can say to you, you got this.
Yeah, it's so important. Now, you have built incredible relationships over the years and worked with so many different types of people. I've even heard you talk about how you're good at reading the room or reading the table. When you're deciding to work with people now or bringing people into the company, are there any must-haves that you look for in those people?
Yes. And honestly, it's not any different than when I was CEO of a public company. Many people will say to you, most people will say to you in an interview, I'm a team player and I want to be on a high-performing team. And not everybody really does.
Right.
They say they do, but then they exhibit signs that say, I don't want to be a team player.
That's right.
I want to do my own thing. I don't like to work with others. You know, I always am critical of others. I don't want to hold myself to the highest standard, because when you're on a high-performing team, that means your peers are giving you constructive feedback. That means your peers are saying you you didn't do this and I'm frustrated with you. That's a high-performing team. Mm-hmm. Mom is not always at the lead telling you what you did and didn't do right. A high-performing team is your peers.
Yeah.
So you'd be amazed at the number of people who don't really want to be on a high-performing team, or you'd be amazed at the number of people who don't want to be a team player. So I have 3 basic principles. You have to want to be on a team and be good at it, and you have to have demonstrated that you know how to be on a great team. You have to talk to me about, give me examples. And if you can't think of them, that's not a good sign. Yeah. Number 2, you have to be good at something. There's a need set there, right? If you think about a great company, even a small one, it's the tapestry of people that bring different expertise. I want to know what your expertise is and how you're going to contribute to the whole. And thirdly, if you don't fundamentally buy into the vision of the company, I don't care if it's big or small, and you can't articulate that, and then in turn, I'm going to share with you the values of the company. So I was talking to my daughter recently, and she was interviewing. This was probably a year or 2 ago. And I said, when you go on the interview, if the person you're interviewing with can't tell you the values of the company, you're working for the wrong company. So you want to be able to fit the needs of the company from a vision standpoint, and you want to fit the needs from a culture standpoint. If those 3 things don't exist, the culture and the vision, the clear team leadership, and being part of the team and being accountable, I don't think it's going to work for me to have you work with me. It's just inherently, it just doesn't work. And so people have said to me, so have you had to fire people for any one of those 3 reasons? And the answer is yes. Especially since I interviewed you, I told you what the 3 non-negotiables were, and you promptly became not a team player, didn't want to, support the vision, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, those are like classic. And I think I am amazed at the number of people who say the right words,
me too,
and then don't want to execute. So that's true. And those 3 things, by the way, have sort of been my 3 things my entire career. Those are not, and by the way, those are not necessarily what I've seen in companies I've worked for. So to go back to what I told you earlier, mm-hmm. I watched people up above make mistakes, or I watched a culture that wasn't healthy, or that didn't develop people. Those are places you probably don't want to work. And in today's environment, you have the choice. I mean, you can pretty much find a job and a company where people care about your development. They care about the culture. They care about the values. They stand for something. And I used to always say, even when I was CEO of a large company, I don't think I went a day without making a decision based on our values. And today, running a small company, trying to become bigger, it's the same thing. It's all based on basic values of how do we help people? How do we get people to work and live in an environment where they have healthy habits? What does that look like? And how do we help people get there? That is not uniquely different.
Yeah. No, those 3 things are fantastic. And I will be writing them down and using them myself. Now, you've been giving back and mentoring and helping people so much. Have there been any mentors that have made a lasting impact on you? And what's the best piece of advice that you've been given?
So I never worked for a woman, and I never had particularly, I had a few people I worked for that I valued and respected. We didn't call it mentoring in those days, right? I mean, but there were people who cared about me. I didn't have a lot of positive influences. Early on, I had a boss who told me that my management style was exhausting, and I thanked him profusely, and he said, no, it's not a compliment. I said, I know you don't mean it to be a compliment. I take it as a compliment. So early on, I learned that, there were certainly things I could do more, I could demonstrate more, I could showcase more, and that I got because I asked for it. I think in my career, both on the marketing side and the ops side, right, I didn't necessarily get a lot of really great coaching that I give today. However, I would ask people, what can you give me? What can you tell me that I can And people would always say, oh, you're doing a great job. And I'm like, yeah, but there must be something I could do more or demonstrate more. And because I grew up with a glass ceiling on a regular basis, I would oftentimes have to leave the organization because I would be told you're the highest ranking female and you're not going any further, or, you're, and I know people look at me in aghast today about that comment, but that was fairly regularly. Yeah. So I would simply say, look, I've gotten to the furthest I'm going to get to. Nobody is willing to allow me, even if I wrote my own development plan, to go any further. So I'll have to look elsewhere. And so I really didn't mind doing that. Now, that's not for everybody, and easier said than done. And I moved a lot. So that's not for everybody. But each time I took a new role, it was one of more responsibility, more accountability, and I would learn different things. So by the time I got to the vice president level, I had learned a ton. So for me, it was all about, I'm going to show up having learned more, done more, experienced more to be this better executive to you. Not necessarily because somebody gave me that coaching, but because I kept drawing it out of each organization or each individual. I think today there are certainly more people, men and women, trying to coach and mentor, but it's not as easy as it sounds. And I was just on the phone the other day with somebody I'm coaching who's in mid-management, and she's like, I go to my boss and I tell my boss every day that I'm not getting anything and I'm not getting any coaching. And he says, you're doing a great job, but he keeps promoting others and not me. And I said, okay, now we have to have the difficult conversation about, do you work in the right environment? And do you have the right, or do you have to think about doing something else? I mean, it's okay to say, I've done everything I can possibly do here. I've learned everything I can. I've brought forward my development plan, but it may not be the right long-term place. Again, I don't say that lightly. Yeah. I say that with a great deal of thoughtfulness, and it's also about where you are. Yeah. and how important, can you do something else, and can you look for that, and are you very thoughtful about that process? Oftentimes I find that people haven't written their own development plan, right? They're waiting for somebody in the organization to say, here, do this, and that's really not how it works. Yeah. You look around and you recognize, I don't have any skill set here. I'd love to volunteer for that project. Early on, I think it just came intuitively to me. I would volunteer for the projects nobody else wanted. I'd go to the places that, I talk about that fairly regularly. Early in my career, I kept being transferred because I would take the job that nobody else wanted, to go to the place nobody else wanted to work at, where there'd been all these problems. I'm like, oh my gosh, let me try turning around, a situation, and it was incredibly valuable that I could then go to the next position and say, yes, I spent a year and a half turning around a market that was unsuccessful, made it successful with the help of a lot of people, and grew the business. And go call them and ask them. They will tell you. But that came from recognizing, yeah, I've done as well as I'm going to do here, but I look over there and I see all this opportunity. I'm going to volunteer for it. No, maybe I don't know everything, and I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do it, but once I get in the position, surely I can, make it work, or create the lemonade out of lemons. And so early in my career, not even realizing I was doing it, I became a turnaround expert because I would go into these places where they had failed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some really great advice you just dropped there was to speak up. Speak up if you want something, or you need more to do, or you want to turn something around.
And I think I would say, of all the mentoring and coaching I talk about, probably that single, I call it a gift, that single skill is not as readily, that one's hard for a lot of people.
It is.
To stand up and say, I'm not getting what I need. I need more of X, Y, and I thought that was generational. It's not generational. There are certain things I think that are more generational than not. You know, I think early on, a lot of us paved the way with, there's still a glass ceiling for people of color, for women, but I think it's less prevalent than it used to be. I think today there's still this hesitancy to say what you need or to ask for the ask.
Yeah. And it's hard as a leader because you want people to speak up, but if it doesn't come naturally or if it's difficult for someone, it's hard to navigate that situation.
Yeah, and I think teaching, you know, I think the thing I learned early on, and I'm not sure how or why I learned it, but people would come to me and say, I don't like so-and-so. This is too difficult for me. I have a problem over here. And I remember early on, I intuitively saying, and what would you like me to do about that? What would you like? You want me to go to your peer and fix that? Or wouldn't you rather build that relationship and fix that yourself? I can certainly give you some coaching, but eventually coming to the boss every time you have an issue and expecting the boss to fix it is kind of like a command and control 1950s environment. That's really not how that's not how corporate America, or frankly, you know, nonprofits or small companies, that's not how it works anymore. You got to fight the good fight. Now, if it's intolerable or there is harassment of any kind, that's a whole different scenario, which I experienced as well. But, you know, again, what did I do when when it wouldn't get any better? I went somewhere else where I knew it would be. I mean, you have to be, again, I don't want to paint a negative picture. I want to paint a realistic picture. But I also think one of the things that people are so worried about finding a job, they don't ask the right questions in the interview. It wasn't the right job to begin with. So getting that fit, I probably talk about more than any single thing when I'm coaching, mentoring, or talking to my own team. Let's make certain we have a good fit here and that person fits in the whole environment. Remember, as you bring a new person on the team, it's everyone's responsibility to make them successful, not just the boss. I mean, I know you know this, but sometimes a lot of this is intuitive. It's just not as easy to execute.
That's right. You usually know pretty early on when they're not the right fit. They might tell you everything in the interview that, you know, they are a team player, they want to be highly successful and move up in the company and all of these things. And then you realize pretty quickly when they don't. So. And
I relate this to, you know, because I told you I have on staff physicians, experts, behavioral psychologists, and the behavioral psychologists are teaching me every day, how long does it take to create a healthy habit? What do you do to destroy a healthy habit? How do you change behavior set? Some of this goes well beyond health to just daily environments in your personal life and your professional life, what you do to sabotage your own success. And I think that for me has been very interesting, especially people trying to do, and physicians have probably taught me this more than anybody. People go to an app and say, I want to fix 5 things. Well, it really doesn't work that way. You aren't going to fix 5 things at once. If you focus on one thing and get it down and feel really good about it, so it starts coming pretty easily to you, then you can start moving on to other things. But you're always going to have to be reminded, some kind of prompt engineering, which we have, about how's it going today? Are you remembering to do all those things you said you were going to do for sleep? Right? Because as you know better than most of us, that's all integrated. That, you know, your sleep, your nutrition, your stress management, all of that's related. And so if one of those things gets out of whack, the whole environment gets out of whack.
Absolutely. So what advice, for those that might be thinking about starting a business, what advice would you give to them? I know. It's a loaded question.
Well, I think fundamentally, the fundamentals, and I think I wrote a seminar about this and did it. If you go on Alurx.com, you can actually see me talking about you really have to have a clear vision, something that you feel passionate about. It has to be differentiated. I don't care what it is, a service, a product, whatever it is, it has to be unique in the marketplace or it won't be successful. So starting a business where you have clear conviction and vision, you've done your homework, it has a differentiator, and you're going to stick to that path, and you're going to surround yourself with people who will help you get there, especially experts or advisors. I can't underestimate the power of those three things. For me personally, even though I have all this experience, ridiculous amount of experience, I still wanted advisors who could help me in the healthcare industry, in insurance industry. And so those kinds of advisors, and again, you have to find a certain kind of person who wants to help you, which I've been very fortunate. I mean, I couldn't speak highly enough of my advisors that do this out of the graciousness of their own heart because they believe in the vision of what we're doing, right? So you need like-minded people, and these advisors have been invaluable in growing our business and getting it to the next level. So I don't want to ever underestimate that. So let's say you're not trying to start a new business. You still need to find those people. And even when I didn't necessarily have mentors early on, through an organization, I met other women who had gotten further up the ladder than I did. And I would ask them, how'd you get there? Like I said, I've never met anybody who's not willing to share. I just haven't. Let me tell you how I got there. And so I've always said and by the way, some of those people that I would ask were direct competitors of my own company, but were very helpful early on. The Carlas, the Pats of the world who worked for competitors and had gotten somewhere much faster than I had. What was it going to take? And they had come from different walks of life. And it was really interesting. Much of what they described to me is what you and I would call nuance.
Okay. Makes sense.
It was never do A, then do B, then do C. It was, well, you got to go here, and then you got to go there, and then you got to think about that. It was a lot of nuance.
Oh, yeah. Now, if we got, yes, as we know. Oh, my.
And now you're breathing.
Right? Thank you for that.
Yeah, there is, and that's alive and well. And so, and I had somebody say to me the other day, I just don't know if I have it in me, Julie. And I said, that's okay too. If that's too hard, and you don't sell your soul for any company. No. So if you think this is beyond your reach, that it's just not something, then you're going to have to start thinking about something else. But if you want to get ahead at the company, this person had spent a fair amount of time explaining to me the culture, the vision. Okay. And so I get your issue. Your issue is very much the person that is a stumbling block for you. It's an individual. Then you're going to have to start working on the nuance. And I'll never forget the words used, which was, I just don't think I have it in me. And I said, okay. And absolutely, that does happen. Yeah. Then you have to think about what plan B is. That's part of that planning. You can't just, it's not like a bull in a china shop. You just can't go in. You have to have the nuance, read the table, understand the players, and understand who's making that decision, whether that's turnable or not. I mean, there is a certain amount of common sense that says, is that situation doable, livable?
Yeah.
The answer isn't, well, I'll just wait until that person leaves. That's probably not a logical, but all of that is part of the world of corporate America, and or even in general, any business, right? Yeah. Small, big. I did some work with a woman in nonprofit who, it's the same basic principle, right? You're dealing with people.
Mm-hmm. And you were dealing with people starting franchises as well, which might not be this, it's a little bit different than starting,
right,
something from total scratch, but you probably give the same advice to them, right?
Well, if you don't like or are good at recruiting and retaining people, I don't know why you'd go into business to begin with. Yeah. So let's start there. Okay. So I can teach you the restaurant business, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a certain amount of wherewithal and income or financial security such that you can start this business. And you have to like the restaurant business, right? Now we have some basic principles. But if you are neither good at recruiting or you're not good at holding on to people, either you have to hire somebody who does that for you, or you're in the wrong business. And it doesn't, I mean, that's the restaurant business, but it's any business, right?
Right.
I mean, I've had my same team, my basic core team, since I started this company. Those people, I care about them. They care about me, and they care about the vision of the company.
Yeah.
Alurx for them is a passion for them. So if you don't have those kinds of folks, I don't know how you get, it's a long-term kind of, if you're not thinking in that regard, kind of hard.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, with the app that you've developed and all that goes into that, and specifically what the app is about, what does your morning routine look like if you have one? Are there any non-negotiables that you have throughout your day?
I do. Now, This is for me, and this is not for everybody, but for me, I have to start my day by some kind of exercise. And I don't do the same thing every day. I've learned long ago that's not actually good for your body. So I do some form of exercise every single day. It's as much physical for me as it is mental. So I get up, I get a half a cup of coffee, I get some kind of protein in me. I go do my workout, right? I start my day. I practice some form of gratitude. Sometimes it doesn't take long, but it's some form of gratitude for the day. I usually look at my day, right? I'm planning ahead, and then I begin the day, whether it's, I have, Zooms right in a row, or I've got to talk to somebody, or I do a lot of writing. And I know that seems odd to you, but in this world where you're meeting with investors and you're trying to pitch and you're talking, there's a lot of writing. So I have trained myself. I used to always think I had to be in the mood to write. Well, you don't have that luxury. So it's all about how to plan for my day. And then it took me a while to realize going back to back for 8 straight hours is not healthy.
Right.
So I learned that through my app. So and for me, sometimes it's a walk. It's just a walk for 2 minutes, 5 minutes.
So helpful.
It's something that I do. And because I work a lot out of my home, it's even something as mundane as go do a load of laundry, just get up and down, walk, do something. But that is my day. And then towards the end of the day, start thinking about, okay, what does dinner look like? What am I doing? How much, can I put some time in there that's just me time? But it's a full day.
Yeah.
But I don't start my day without, and then I'm big on protein.
Yeah, nice.
Throughout the day,
That's
because
so
I
important.
have learned that partially because I do work out every day, partially just our body wants.
Yeah.
So it's, and I had to train myself through the app to learn to eat in the morning, because I had a tendency not to eat, and that's really not good for you.
Okay.
So
that's
it's
me.
it's just the learning, and then running my day accordingly, and then stopping at least once or twice a day, even if it's just 5 minutes. I need that. And then if it's really, there's something that doesn't go well, I find more than anything, box breathing is incredibly helpful. Breathing in, breathing out, holding, it's really incredibly helpful. So that I've learned as well.
It is. And I have signed up for the app, and I have taken some of the stress management classes in there that are great.
Yes.
So I appreciate
Yes.
that very much. But my morning starts out very much like yours. I think it is important to have that time in the morning for yourself, taking care of yourself. And it's so much of what Alurx is here to help everybody with as well.
That's right.
So.
That's right.
Now, when you think about the next 5 years, what is your vision for Alurx?
I will always be involved. I mean, for the rest of my life, whether I'm an advisor, whether I'm on the board, whether I'm just a participant, I will always be involved, because it's life-changing.
Yeah.
So for me, this is my dream come true. So I always want to be involved in it. And whatever that looks like in the next 5 years, my ego's in check. If the next 5 years involves the next generation, for somebody to take it to a whole nother level, I'm very supportive of that. I I don't need to be at the helm to be to feel good about and proud of what we've accomplished. But I do see myself involved one way or the other for the rest of my life.
Fantastic. Well, you should be very proud of Alurx and everything that you've accomplished so far in your career. I can't wait to see where this goes, and I'd love to maybe we'll have to follow up on this.
I promise.
Yes, awesome.
You go on the list.
Well, it's been such a pleasure today. You've really been so inspiring and helpful. I know everybody watching is going to get a lot out of this, so very much appreciated. Thank you so much for giving us all your time today.
Thank you for letting me come today. That was fun.
Good. It was.
This is the Female Founder Show with host and entrepreneur Bridget Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN. If you're a female founder and would like to help other female founders with your inspiring story, we would love to hear from you.